Welcome to Wise Man's Dollar, a podcast for everyday working people who want to make wiser decisions with their money, reduce financial stress, and build lasting wealth for themselves and the next generation. I'm Sunjata, and I'm so happy that you're here with me once again. The big idea for today's episode is that liquidity creates options, and options create freedom. This is a part of our 8 benefits of whole life insurance series, and ultimately why it's perfect for infinite banking, aka becoming your own banker. So, if you've been following us so far, we've already covered the first two benefits, and in this episode, we're going to talk about the third benefit. So, let me tell you about all 8 benefits that make properly structured dividend paying whole life insurance a powerful asset. The first one is guarantees. The second one is constant compounding. The third is what today's episode is going to be about, liquidity. Fourth is the privacy. Fifth, the income tax free transfer of wealth. Next, we have the competitive yield. Then the monthly cash value growth. And lastly, the flexible loan provision. I'm going to do an episode on each of these 8 benefits. So make sure if you missed the first two, you go back and check those out and then come back for the next few. So, again, in the last episode, we talked about how your money compounds without interruption. That was the second benefit, the uninterrupted compounding interest, which is really, really powerful. And when you understand the power of this asset and the idea that it doesn't go backwards, it's always growing, it's always compounding. It gets really, really exciting when you look at a policy illustration that shows you how your money is growing month after month, year after year, guaranteed. And while uninterrupted compounding is powerful, another powerful benefit is that the benefit is, well, if you can't access your money when you need it, that power is limited. So that's why liquidity is also another powerful benefit of this asset. So let's get into some of the core ideas for this episode. And one of those ideas is that, a lot of people think that wealth and liquidity are the same thing, but they're not. You see, someone can have a large 401k policy through their job, or they can have a lot of equity in their home. They can have really thriving investment accounts through the stock market or mutual funds. Yet, they may still struggle to access that money quickly. You see, liquidity equals how quickly and easily you can access money when you need it. So, being wealthy on paper and having access to money are not always the same thing. A lot of times with those 401k accounts, for example, there's a penalty to access the money, and then you have to pay it back with the interest and etc. And it's limited on what you can actually take a loan out for when you have a 401k. You can't just take it out for anything. It has to be for specific categories that are outlined through your job. And home equity, that's relying on credit, and you have to go through a whole underwriting process and hope that you get the loan based on your credit, your debt to income ratio, and all these other elements that make it a little difficult to access that money. So think about life, you know, in regular everyday life. Why do you need liquidity? Well, cars break down, right? Roofs leak, kids need things, or opportunities appear, or jobs change and you might have a gap in employment and you need access to some capital to help get you through, those dry months. Or you have a business and your business needs capital. It's never a question of will life happen. The question is, will you have access to capital when it does? You see, the way that we frame this at Factum Financial and how we talk about and teach about liquidity is that liquidity is your financial buffer. It helps you to survive uncertainty, but it also helps you to capitalize on opportunities when they arise. So let's talk about why most people struggle financially. It's often because once they get their paycheck, they spend the majority of it, right? So many people are living paycheck to paycheck. It doesn't matter if you're making 50,000 a year or 150,000 a year. There's a lot of people who still live paycheck to paycheck because they spend the bulk of their income. On the flip side, a lot of people also, what they don't spend, they invest. They may put it all into matching that 401k, or they're really heavily invested into real estate or something like that, where they're basically locking their money away. And the result of that is they don't have access to capital when they need it. They end up depending on credit cards or banks and ultimately feeling a lot of financial pressure. And ultimately, every financial emergency feels a lot bigger when you don't have liquidity. So let's talk about the opportunity side of liquidity. You see, you may understand, liquidity as protection based on the examples I just gave, but it's also important to build liquidity because having access to capital, cash, when opportunities arise is also a really, really important wealth principle. You see, when investment opportunities appear, or business opportunities appear, or real estate opportunities appear, even discounted purchase opportunities, or you may need to help a family member with something. Without liquidity, those opportunities can pass you by. But with it, you can act. You know, um, I know that we all heard stories and hear stories, over the years, but especially back in like 2008, 2009, 10, 12, 11, 12, when the housing market, really dropped housing values. And people who had a strong liquid cash position were able to swoop in and buy properties really, really low. And all throughout, for anyone who's an investor listening to this, you understand the value of having access to capital and cash so that you could take advantage of those type of opportunities. So, you know, let's talk about the tie-in. This makes me think about, my granddaddy, the wise man. And if you've been following this podcast, the reason why I call it Wise Man's Dollar is because my granddaddy lived by very, very specific principles that tie into all of the principles that I talk about on this podcast and all of the principles of infinite banking. And my granddaddy really, really had strong savings habits. And he never allowed his money coffers to be depleted. He would work extra jobs, even when he was teaching, he still worked side jobs just so that he always had money for rainy days. And he saved really, really aggressively. He always kept a reserve of cash. And my granddaddy may not have called it liquidity, but he really understood the importance of having access to capital. And that really ties in well to what we're talking about in today's episode. And as you all know, if you've been following this podcast and you follow my journey, my granddaddy was a huge, huge influence on me. And he taught me so many of his, wealth principles. And I got to observe it as a young person. And also, even after, even after he passed on, his legacy lives today based on the assets that he passed down to the next generations because of his savings habits and of how he managed his money. In terms of me and my personal journey with leveraging this asset, one of the things that stood out to me while I was learning about infinite banking, it wasn't just the emphasis on the growth potential of putting my money in this environment, my liquid safe money, my savings money in this environment. It was also the idea of having access to it. Traditional advice often tells people to lock their money away into long-term investments and wait decades and hope everything works out with the market. Hope that you don't reach retirement age and you happen to be in the middle of a recession, or a market downturn. And now all the money you saved over the years has been greatly diminished. The benefit of putting my money into a properly structured dividend paying whole life insurance policy as my savings environment is that I can have growth and access working together. So, the bigger wealth lesson with all of this is that, wealth building is not just about accumulation, it's also about resilience. And the way that we frame that at Factum is that the stronger your hold category, which is the savings category in your financial plan, the stronger your investment category can become. And they actually balance each other out because you don't want to be, over leveraged with all of your money going into growth, let's say accelerated growth opportunities that come with risk. You want to balance that with, safe assets and investment. Well, I'm sorry, safe assets, because we know, if you heard, again, something I've said over and over is that these properly structured dividend paying whole life insurance policies, they are not investments, they are assets. And it's important to balance your portfolio with safe assets that don't have an opportunity to go backwards because of a market crash or something like that. So, a key way of holding this and understanding this is that liquidity, it, especially your liquidity, if it's put in the proper environment, like the environment that we talk about in this show, liquidity is what allows you to play both offense and defense at the same time. So, the key takeaways that I would like you to walk away from this episode with are that liquidity, it creates options, right? It protects you, and it also gives you an opportunity to be prepared for opportunities. And options create freedom, and freedom reduces financial pressure. So, the person with access to capital often has an advantage over the person with higher net worth, but no liquidity. Keep that in mind. Now, the next episode, we're going to go into the next benefit of whole life, properly structured, dividend paying whole life insurance. And we're going to talk about one of the most powerful and overlooked benefits of whole life, which is the income tax free transfer of wealth. So I can't wait to share all those benefits with you in the next episode. So thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Wise Man's Dollar. This show is designed to spark curiosity about how people take control of their money, relieve financial stress, and create intentional wealth using properly structured dividend paying whole life insurance and the infinite banking concept. If you would like to go deeper, visit go.factumfinancial.com/Sunjata, and that's the spelling of my first name, for free access to a growing library of educational videos and resources. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit like, subscribe, and please drop a comment and share what resonated with you. And also share this with someone you care about, because wisdom grows when we pass it along. And remember, like my granddaddy always said, any man can make a dollar, but it takes a wise man to spend it. I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.